Did you know that in California, a case was just decided, and it was just decided in the last 24 hours. And it was a kind of horrendous case because California has had the most severe restrictions on churches of any state in the United States. And a friend of mine, Pastor Ché Ahn, was threatened. Imagine this. A senior pastor who has been for years a leader of, I think he has 600 global churches, great church there in Pasadena. At the, I guess it's a community, I know they have a special name for it, but it's the Pasadena Performing Arts Center. And they allow the city to be able to use it for concerts and such. And here this statesman and pastor with his large church, and he's a man with an Korean background, Fuller Theological Seminary student graduate. And he is threatened with jail for having church services. His people are threatened with $1,000 fines for going to church. Talk about making an offering. But the Supreme Court had to deal with the case because the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals would not stand with him, would be willing not only shut down the church, but begin, I guess, the systematic jailing of pastors and fining of Christians. This is right now in America. So the Supreme Court had to take the case, and they chose in their decision, I believe it was 6-3, to imagine there were 3 that would have sent this guy off to jail. My God. Anyway, but it was 6-3. So the ban has been lifted on indoor worship services. However, there's still a debate as to how many people can go. 25% of a church or what? They don't do that, by the way, in other facilities. For instance, one of the judges in California who was dissenting with their opinion of wanted to overturn this decision said California is the only state in the country that imposes this kind of ban. Yet in exactly the same locales where indoor worship is prohibited, California allows a vast array of secular facilities to open indoors, including retail stores, shopping malls, factories, food processing plants, warehouses, transportation facilities, childcare centers, the colleges. Of course, you want to interrupt that money flowing in colleges, libraries, and the sports facilities and movie studios, to name a few. So, fortunately, the justices in that 6-3 decision granted that appeal, and Friday evening, 2 churches, the South Bay United, I think it's a Pentecostal church, and Ché Ahn's church, were able to, South Bay United Pentecostal and Harvest Rock Church were the ones that were in the case against Newsom, who, by the way, is only 500,000 votes, I think, away from a recall. 500,000 votes. By the way, I think they're requiring voter identification. Is that an irony? They're requiring voter identification. I don't know whether they just don't mail out ballots to all of us and, let California vote. So anyway, Ché Ahn, the senior pastor, said that he said the church decided to challenge that ban after it was singled out by confusing California edicts. Listen to this. They gave first-rate essential preferences to abortion clinics, marijuana dispensaries, and liquor stores. Those things are important. Get your marijuana, your abortion clinic, and your liquor. After all, that's important. Not that Pentecostal church down there? We don't want the singing. Germs can fly. So that 6-3 decision challenged the state's restrictions on even on banning the singing. Imagine that. The devil doesn't like singing. Now, I know someone's going to say, well, it's airborne. airborne viruses. This whole thing is a specious science. The whole blasted thing. We've had 1 million people at a time, 500,000 people at rallies in Washington, and there's no pandemic spread associated with the fact that they weren't wearing masks at these rallies. Anyway, the High Court said that the state may limit attendance at indoor services to 25% of the building's capacity, and singing and chanting may be restricted as well. That was the appeals court. But the 6 conservative justices in the majority differed among themselves. Amy Coney Barrett, evidently, isn't sold on the singing thing. She's suspicious that singing, I don't know, singing as opposed to what? Yodeling, I guess, is highly contagious. So Justice Coney Barrett said she wasn't convinced that the singing should be lifted. This will cause you to put your faith in the Lord, all you people that were saying, yeah, we got suddenly got a charismatic Catholic up there. So the court's 3 liberals, Elena Kagan and just Stephen Breyer and Sonia Sotomayor, of course, dissented because they simply don't know how the justice of the court could make believe they're scientists, especially when there's raging pandemic. By the way, the raging pandemic language, I think, is rather dramatic. That's kind of a true Shakespearean. Raging pandemic that isn't producing the raging mortality rate that they're saying. So anyway, I wanted you to catch this because it's a victory. This night, these pastors, 2 churches, boldly, out of all the churches in California, these 2 were the ones who went to the Supreme Court. And now all the churches in California are able to reopen their doors. And I think that that's powerful. I think Governor Newsom did have a moment of rare hypocrisy regarding the singing thing. I think he did allow in Hollywood a music contest to go on. They were given a specific waiver from the singing threat. So, Pastor Ché is celebrating tonight, as we all should, because those courts aren't packed. They are the final arbiter, and it looks like the 6-3 is a good indication that it's a healthy, margin there. It wasn't like 5-4, as we saw earlier. And Chief Justice John Roberts, in a moment of let's just say it was a good sign because he voted along with the other conservative justices. So the thing I want to say is that the persecution that we have seen coming, it looks like you ought to brace yourself, Bessie, because it's real. But the other side of this is that the Lord is, I believe, with us. And I want to say something real quick. The states are the greatest guarantor and resistance for Marxism, socialism, and totalitarianism. Remember this, that Trump's victory in terms of his election coattails gave him a majority of states where the state legislators, and you guys know how that works now. There's these state senators, right? Like, 20, 30, 40, 50. These state legislators, we picked up 2 whole new chambers, 2 whole new, it was expanded dominion for, can't use the word dominion now, for the red state legislators. We picked up a governorship. We picked up congressional seats when we're supposed to lose them. And this means that the redistricting plans that Eric Holder and Obama and all that leftist money put out there, to get a hold of their state secretary of states to certify those electors. And boy, you see how smart those, and the DAs to prosecute. They're just grabbing these positions and lining up their team. But they failed because there is a populist wave in America, and it took seats in Congress when it could have lost. It held a line in the Senate. It's still 50-50. I mean, even with the the dubious situation in Georgia, it's still a 50-50 precarious thing like that. And you see some of those Democrats, remember this, they got to be looking over their shoulder because they're up for re-election too. And all the congressional candidates, they can only go so far in terms of how crazy they're going to get. Executive orders are flying out, but executive orders can be like a house of cards that can come down because it's still going to come down to, in many cases, voting in the Senate and the Congress, and midterms is in 2 years, and the states actually have greater strength for conservatives than the federal government. And the federal government is now, except for, there's like a 25% crazy factor in terms of like, it doesn't matter how bad these laws get, 25% of the left will go, yippee-hi-hi. So, but there's a whole lot of Democrats that are looking at the Paris Accords and going, what? So China doesn't have to observe those industrial, pollution accords, but the United States does. And then we got the Green Deal, which is going to fund all those environmental, businesses that are nestled in there with the big bureaucrats in Washington to get their money. But I got a point I wanted to make, and this is my final thought. And I'm stopping here because it's late at night, and I just want to get this other thought out. What is the deal with the Green New Deal deal? Because this climate thing, it's so maddeningly unjustifiable, crazy, and I'll tell you why. And my logic is compelling and irrefutable. Here's the logic I want to give you. How could the Pentagon be declaring a war on climate? The Pentagon is declaring its war. You want to talk about a useless use of military, go to war for climate change. When, your country is, when you don't have the control over the industrial belching capacity of the toxic India and China, which is like, still almost primitive in terms of its industry compared to Europe and the United States and its pollution index. But here's the point. We had a COVID pandemic, a year of sabbatical for planet Earth. Can you imagine if the activists had said, we want the whole globe to shut down for a year, shut down your businesses, shut down those industries, shut down those belching smokestacks for a year and give the climate a break. Well, they got it. They had a forced nature sabbatical. The entire world stopped. The cars stopped. People were stuck in their houses. It was almost like the most radical sacrifice of the whole global community. And now they come out after the entire earth has had an extended Sabbath of recovery time from all pollutants. And they're coming out, we've got a war on climate change. You see, it's not a real war. It's not a real thing because they don't have a premise for pushing the issue right now. That's like saying, all the small businesses that are being busted up in the United States and destroyed. And saying that, we're going to have small business break laws. We're going to start giving a break to small businesses so they can take weeks off and months off. No, they're already out of business for 6 months and a year. So in other words, the climate's taking a break. So where's this climate urgency all about? They're not even talking about that because they make no sense to begin with. Anyway, the nature of what's coming up is going to be good because this backlash, this conservative backlash, this Christian situation is kind of interesting because the wrecking ball, boom, is showing Waffle House Christian leadership and strong Christian leadership. There's a distinction between the two. And you're going to see it more and more and more because I think a word that I had in the very beginning when the COVID thing came out, I was trying to figure out, it was two things were interesting. Call not a conspiracy what they call a conspiracy and do not fear what they fear. It was the first thing I said. Remember, I crawled into a plane and I said, that's the first word I got. It's the last flights that we had, I think, before they shut down. And I think that a whole lot of stuff that you're hearing on the news is don't believe what they're saying. Because I know you don't, but I mean, because they've got conspiracies, through their head all the time. And by the way, they're all obsessing on QAnon. I don't know what the heck the psychosis is. I mean, we could talk about QAnon. QAnon would be, on like 20% of the time or 40% of the time, and then radically dumb, 60 or 70% of the time. And so, but the left, CNN, has been consistently off all the time. I mean, from Russia to the Ukraine. The FBI was sitting on a laptop that could have saved Donald Trump his first impeachment. The flippin' FBI had a laptop with Hunter Biden evidence, and the FBI was so corrupt it never even gave its own president a heads up. Hey, we have a laptop over here. This could be embarrassing. Can we just cool it with the impeachment thing? Not one leader was there. And so you have a right to be distrustful, but I'm telling you, while they're obsessing over the right wing and what they call an insurrection, which is no insurrection that happened on January 6th. Insurrection is an article that just came out from Time magazine saying that, describing how the left organized their ability to beat Trump, and part of what they had to hold back was 400 separate cities with funded activists ready to raise hell, light things up, burn things down, and raise a ruckus if Trump dared to accomplish his coup of a electoral victory. If somehow he won, they had 400 explosions in the country they had orchestrated that they had to say, don't do it. It looks like we might have pulled this thing off. They got 400. The best that you could say about January 6th was, we don't have 400, 100, we don't have 4. We had one spontaneous, frustrated expression of the population. And supposedly riots is the way, we were told, that people that have no other voice are speaking. Well, this wasn't even a riot. And so, and by the way, that I remember watching Governor Walker. People forget this. Governor Walker of Michigan, of Wisconsin. Do you remember when the unions and the government workers, when he was trying to cut back on the waste in the budget and tried to balance the budget, and he brought stringent disciplines, and they occupied the Capitol, and the news media was celebrating it because they occupied the Capitol. So, for a couple of hours, people go wandering in to the Capitol there, and what do you got? You got an occupied Capitol, hardly occupied, and they were out, posing on the front steps and all that. But it's not like the left has never done that, or do they have some kind of amnesia? But I guess it's justified rights of protest when it's occupying the governor's mansion. But if it's occupying the Capitol building or some part of it, then I guess that counts as an insurrection. Hence the barbed wire surrounding Washington from no threat other than the psychological one that is in their head. But this is the nature of the era that we're in, which is why I'm glad to see the Supreme Court in its present constitution of 9 justices it looks balanced. The next 2 years, see, they're going to have to look. Democrats are going to be looking. How far can they really push their own people into lost jobs with the Keystone Pipeline, lost union jobs? I mean, they're going to try to do legalization of illegal citizens and all that stuff. I know what's out there. But what I'm saying to you is that for those of you that are worried, some of you aren't worried, but I don't think it's let's just put it this way. It's good that you're not worried. But if you were really informed, you would be. because there's a lot of damage that can be done to this country by the kinds of decisions. Hey, we're going to have what? Iran's going to get back on track again with a nuclear weapon? That's hardly encouraging. So the economy can only bear so much irresponsible spending, pork and bailing out of the dysfunctional cities that were run by Democrats that have no budgets. And so there's, and what happens if you got 20 million citizens suddenly all, getting government funding? And what does that do to the possibility of ever winning an election again? What happens if, Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia are added as states, and you add those senators, Democrat senators, or pack the courts? There's all kinds of ways the spirit of lawlessness can operate. But there's this mechanism of the 2022 phenomena. And what I want to encourage you with is that I believe, and I've said this all along, God is taking all the prayers we prayed, but he isn't giving us that. Imagine with all this hostility and rage and mental bizarreness. Imagine if Donald Trump was president. 4 years of raging hell. Who knows, in the wisdom of God, he might say, scratch and sniff. You ever have a scratch and sniff? All right, take the scratch and sniff test. Hey, here's socialism. Here's unhinged, progressive Democrats running everything. And how's it look? And then when you watch the consequences, the harvest of that, it might actually cure people. It might be like, I don't want to tell you the story, but I will. I was 18 years old before I got saved, and I remember getting drunk on gin. Well, my dad drank gin, and, well, actually, he didn't drink gin, but we were over at a friend's house, and they were making these little gin and tonics. And, ooh, it tastes so good. I was drinking these gin and tonics. But I got sick as a dog. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't handle the smell of gin. To this day, it makes me nauseous. You see, I had what I thought I liked. And what it did was it had an adverse effect on me, and I can't stand it now. So how do you know that part of God's remedy for America is to say, even if Trump was president, there would have been just rage and lunacy. So maybe we're going to experience a taste of what it's like to have a dose of socialism running your life. And I think that there's so many libertarians out there. There's so many people that are independents. They're not even Christian. They just don't like being controlled, and they don't trust government. There's a lot of people that are like that. And it's not just conservatives. And I think that you're going to see the emergence of Donald Trump. And, they're trying to say, get rid of Trump, trying to destroy it. And even Christians, there's some Christian wackos that don't get the fact that Donald Trump owns that populist movement because he's the only guy that stands up and pushes back. He's got 75 million people that voted for him. Picked up 10 million more votes than the news media could keep from him. And no matter what they did, he picked up people. So he's still the wrecking ball. And I suspect that that he is going to be a most interesting character as we go into that 2021, 2022 period. And I think the teetering and tottering back and forth that we're experiencing this year is going to produce some very clear, powerful lines. And I believe a populist backlash with an awakening is in the mix in that 2022 period. I do not believe that America is going to be saved without Christ. And I don't believe politics is going to save America because they're corrupt on both sides of the aisle. But I believe that the circumstances are going to be propitious for the population to be experiencing a turning to God and a turning to taking possession of their own government. And I believe that instead of having a conversation where our politicians are speaking for us, that you're going to see the populace wanting its freedom of speech and not wanting to forfeit its precious rights, like this right to worship, that if every church would exert its the right to worship and go to church, then you wouldn't have this tyranny of governors arbitrarily threatening pastors with jail and congregations with fines. Because you can't fulfill the verse, neglect not the assembling of yourselves together. By Zoom, you can't fulfill the doctrine of laying on of hands and water baptism by Zoom. So, you can't, there's only so much you can do, by Zoom. So I'm believing that there's coming together these pieces right now, and it's a good omen in the wind that religious liberty is one battle line that the highest court in the land is not willing to surrender. And it's a stable balance there in the courts. Congress is about to, they're about to go into the rumble seat. 20 Republican senators are looking over their shoulder now because they're up in 2022. And Donald Trump is just saying, I've been quiet. I behaved myself, but I'm coming back. And it's going to be wild ride. And I'm telling you, it's the hour for the church to not be going, well, I'm not getting involved. Let's just ignore those people. You have to get involved. The question is, how shall we get involved? That's where the wisdom of God is going to be needed. We don't have it all yet, but I do believe it's coming to us, and it's getting clearer and clearer all the time. The path is getting clearer. I can see clearly now. The rain is gone, and I can see all obstacles in my way. All right, I love you. Have a good night. Go to church in the morning. If you don't have a church you can go find a church you can go to. Some bold church, if they're a bold church. Hey, if they're like Jack Hibbs, that if you're really strong and you're standing your conservative principles, you might be shocked that you might actually have church growth and revival going on right now. Why not? And so good things are coming to a theater near you. Look up. Remember what Jesus said? When these things begin to happen, look up, because your redemption draws nigh. That's a principle. When you see cycles of tribulation and trouble and shaking, don't look at, turn off what's going on in the news. Look up, and look up, because your redemption, your deliverance, your solution, your capacity to walk with God is coming nearer to you. Because where sin does abound, supernatural divine enablement does much more abound. Hallelujah. Love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Share this with your friends, by the way. Would you share this with your friends? And thank you for being with me in this late night broadcast. If you like this video, make sure you like it here, and also subscribe so that you can get other broadcasts in the future as soon as they come out. And you know what would help me? Make a comment and give me your thoughts on what you'd like to hear about in the future.